Hello, everyone. Kyle with Andrew Hilton here, and we have a beer tasting coming up on June 22nd at 6 o'clock. You might have just slightly guessed I'm not thrilled about it. Big thanks to Dwayne, who pointed out that after last week, there are exactly 4 Black IPAs on Liquor Connect right now, and they do technically fit into our budget, and we can do a beer tasting about them. So why not? Let's just do that, shall we? Why is a Black IPA terrible? Well, it's mashing together two things that don't really go well together. This is the lobster stuffed with tacos from The Simpsons. They are two great tastes that don't taste great together. This is just a nightmare imposed upon the world by a craft beer scene that has run out of good ideas long ago. Now, we have 4 breweries on the table. From Burnaby, we have Steamworks, Black Angel, Black IPA. It's horrible. From Dandy, we have In the Bleak Midwinter. I think bleak is the operative word here. From sound yet?
There we go. Here we go.
Okay, good.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, okay. Well, you know what? I really feel like this is kind of the
Yeah, okay.
this is just how it was going to go from the start. So, welcome everyone to the Black IPA tasting. Here we all are, and aren't we all so grateful for it? Now, we'll talk a little bit about the style, but I do want to just set the tasting order. I did go through these a few minutes ago. We're going to do the Steamworks, followed by the Revival Brewcade, followed by the Duclaw, and we'll finish up with the Dandy. So let's get some Steamworks Black Angel into our glasses here, and let's get this thing started. Now, for anyone who is perhaps, been living under the rock forever, I don't like Black IPAs. Never have. One style of beer that I just genuinely don't enjoy. So there's a variety of reasons for that, which I'm sure we'll go over as we kind of get through this, but let's talk a little bit about what a Black IPA is, where it came from, why it's important, as we get into our first beer here. You notice I do have a spill bucket because I don't really intend on finishing all of these. Okay, so who do we hold to blame for the existence of the Black IPA? Well, that would be an absolute legend of the brewing industry, a man who wrote many, many books, the person who opened Vermont's very first microbrewery, the person who mentored the people who went on to found Alchemist, who brewed Hetty Topper and Hill Farmstead, that brewed these two gentlemen together, kind of created the New England IPA. And that person, of course, is Greg Noonan, who in 1988, after years of lobbying, finally managed to get the Vermont beer laws changed such that they could actually open the Vermont Pub and Brewery so that they could actually start selling their own beer. Now, the thing about Black IPAs is the first one that was brewed actually at the Vermont Pub and Brew was brewed about 1990, but they kind of stayed in the background. They were a bit of a local curiosity. They had a little bit of a historical precedent with some of the heavily hopped India hopped porters out of the UK. Same thing with IPAs. They were very, very strongly hopped dark beers, so that by the time they got to India, they still tasted fresh. The idea being that by the time they got to India, the hop flavor would have dropped out. They weren't supposed to be drank that hoppy, but some people got a taste for them, and for a brief period in the 19th century, they were a little bit of a thing. But Black IPAs really started to catch on around the year 2005, to the point by 2010, I think most breweries either offered one as a year-round offering, as Phillips did, or they at least had it as a seasonal, usually in fall, getting out of like the wheat ales and fruit ales of summer and before they started brewing like their heavier beers. Now, Black IPA, it really is a mashing together of two styles. You take a reasonably dark beer. Now, there is a lot of debittered malt in these, so this isn't the same as brewing a porter. I would say your grain bill for these is roughly equivalent to, say, a German Schwarzbier, which uses a lot of debittered malt like Carafa. The idea being that you get that dark color, you get that roasty flavor, but you don't get any of the bitterness or intense roastiness that you do get out of a non-debittered dark malt. And then on top of that, they go ahead and they add a whole bunch of hops. Now, there's two things that I think are interesting about that. And the first is actually the alcohol. On all of these beers, one is 6.5, all three of the others are 7. Now, IPAs now can come as low as like 5.5. They usually run 5.5 to 6.5. 7 or 7.5 is quite rare. You don't see it very often anymore. Black IPAs, to a point, are very, very much... They're still brewed to their heyday of, say, 2007 to 2013, somewhere in there, back when IPAs almost universally were 6.5, 7% alcohol, and that hasn't really changed. As the popularity of Black IPA kind of declined, nobody really thought to go back and say, well, this beer style, this awful, shitty beer style, I'm going to go in and revolutionize it. We're going to make a lower alcohol version. The other thing that hasn't happened is with the explosion of new, like, fresh hop varieties, with the New England IPA craze and everything else, we've still traditionally seen, and I think you'll see in all of these, you still get that big West Coast pine, citrus, like grapefruit concentrate sort of characteristic out of the hops. And again, one, I think that was the style as was set kind of around, 2005, 2008. And the second part of that would be you need something really, really punchy to get over and above that roasty background of the malt. Whereas if you use something really, really delicate, it wouldn't show through. Now, I say that, and actually the hop that was in my head when I said delicate was actually Galaxy. My favorite Black IPA of all time actually did use Galaxy, but that would take really, really, really careful brewing. You'd have to know exactly what you were going to do. And another thing we're going to get into a little bit later is Black IPAs, they had their day. We'll talk about this a little bit more with the revival, but they kind of had their day. And as a result, if you've got 24 of these to sell off the shelf, it's going to take you a little while, and they might not always be the freshest. And if you're using one of these Nouveau hops, it might not taste right by the time the last can is sold. All right, I can't put it off physically any longer. Let's jump right in, shall we? Okay, yeah, I get the hops. There's some soapiness here. There's some kind of pine adjacent aromas. There is definitely some herbal, vegetal, spicy things going on here. If I had an IPA that had this level of hopping in the nose, I would probably send it back. Not because, it's a Black IPA necessarily, but you think about, especially for our longer term viewers, think about the number of IPAs we've had over this time, and just close your eyes and forget that it's a Black IPA and get a snoot full of that. It doesn't smell good, does it? It doesn't smell like something I want to put in my body. Yet I'm gonna do it anyway. So, I will say, I actually quite like the grain bill on this. When we get to the color comparison here, which is my favorite part of this tasting that we're shooting entirely in black and white, we will see that this is actually quite a bit lighter in color than the other Black IPAs. This has the color, and I'm sure it's really showing up well on the camera, but this has a lovely kind of cola dark, cola black sort of coloring to it. It's not opaque, it's not inky, it's really just a lovely cola brown. It looks like a big glass of root beer, to be perfectly honest with you. And yes, that was another thing I noticed, and that was something I was going to get into here a little bit, is Black IPAs. They were the very, very first viral beer style. This was the style that, like, when it came out, when it started to emerge, this was at the absolute peak of popularity of both Rate Beer and Beer Advocate. This was before Untapped. And it was this new cool thing on the scene. It was the best of black beer. It was the best of IPA. And at that point in history, the top 50 beers on Rate Beer were pretty universally either a big IPA or a giant barrel-aged imperial stout. There wasn't much else on there. So as a result, it was kind of these two things that everybody liked and people went nuts for it. And then people burned out on it really, really fast and nobody else wanted one. And yeah, the freshness on this is September of 2021. Again, I can't know that before I order because that's not how the Alberta government liquor ordering system is set up. But yeah, that's something that any of these, we're always going to have that question in the back of our minds with the Black IPA is, how long has it been sitting there? Because this is not a hot selling style. Let's jump into the revival on that note. And yes, I wasn't going to call it Eric's color system because, well, I'm kind of making a farce of it with the fact it's a black and white tasting, but yeah. And again, I'm not sure if any of that's going to actually show up with the camera, but that is absolutely opaque. I can get a tiny little bit of like a toffee brown thing along the bottom, but functionally this beer is completely black. I don't know, maybe it'll show up a little bit. I don't know what the limitations of black and white on this are, but this is substantially lighter than this is. So a little bit of color variation there on our black IPAs. As a result, I'm expecting the revival to be substantially roastier, substantially richer, and I believe this is also one of the ones at 7. Yes, it is. Brew date is not legible on my can. So if someone at home has a brewed on date that's not smudged, do let me know. And yeah, it does have a little paler head. Now, I'll say this has a little bit more interesting nose. I do get some pretty things off of this. Like, the nose actually to me is very candied. I get Tootsie Roll, I get red berry. The hops are certainly there, but it's actually the roasty sweetness of the debittered malt that's coming out first for me. And that's where I'm getting Tootsie Roll, maybe cola. And then the hops are sitting on top. Now, I've taken the last couple of seconds here to think about this a little bit. The hops here are present, and I've been really struggling to pick out anything particular from them. Like, I get something in the lemongrass family. I definitely get a clearer, cleaner citrus, and it seems to be more of a lemony citrus. I certainly get spice. I certainly get something like a freshly chipped cedar wood off the nose on this, all of which I quite like. But again, if your premise is this is an IPA, only it's dark, this on the nose isn't much of an IPA. If on the other hand you want to say, well, this is just a porter, except we've hopped it very aggressively, I tend to be a little bit more on that side. I don't know. My problem is instead of a full can of this, I could have half a can each of an IPA and a porter and enjoy the experience more. The problem is for me that this beer, while it's, I think, very well done to the style, this is not something that I would ever seek out because it's trying to do too many things at once. Who are these folks? Revival Brewcade got started in 2018. They have a 2-story brewery arcade, I live in downtown Calgary, actually. I was actually going to try and get over there yesterday when I was in Calgary. Unfortunately, I didn't make it. I got tied up at the new 33 Acres location, which is not fun to park at, but an absolutely fantastic spot. And I spent so much time there that I didn't make it to Revival Brewcade because I couldn't have another beer and still get to my hotel. So anyway, they have a very large, like, main floor tasting area, lots of arcade cabinets, lots of pinball tables, and then downstairs is actually the brewery itself, and they have most of their pinball tables down in what they call the boiler room. So really cool spot, gets really well reviewed. The beers that I've had, this is the second one I've had, I also had their IPA, have been generally very good, other than the fact it's a black IPA. It's certainly better than the Steamworks. Ooh, that's a good point about the acidity, Craig. Thank you. Yeah, this does have a really nice acidity that's running through it. And again, a lot of that's going to be like alpha acid from the hops, of course, but this has a very lovely, fresh, bright, enjoyable mouthfeel. And I think that the reason this didn't is simply age. Okay, Duclaw out of Baltimore, Maryland. Now, these folks have been around since 1996. Their most famous beer, the one that you may have seen around, one that we've had in the store before, is their Sweet Baby Jesus, which is their chocolate peanut butter porter. It tastes like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It seems really, really cool. The other one that's actually been in a few different places all over the internet lately, and this was the one that I actually first thought of when I saw Duclaw, was their Sour Me Unicorn Farts. It is a Fruity Pebbles cereal sour with edible glitter in it. And yes, we'll have that on the shelf on Wednesday. Of course we will. So we are getting that in, and we will be working that into a tasting in the very, very short future because that sounds absolutely hilarious. So yes, Sour Me Unicorn Farts Fruity Pebbles Sour with edible glitter is one of the other things they're very well known for. However, they are by and large a fairly traditional brewery, or at least they started out that way. They are one of the more well-respected kind of 1990s start breweries on the East Coast of the United States. I've had them several times. I was not aware that almost the whole range was actually in Alberta, coming in through craft beer imports, so that's kind of cool. You know, I'm not trying to rush through it. Okay, that's a lie. I am trying to rush through it. But there's also only so much I can really talk about with these because really, I don't appreciate the style well enough to really dig into it. Like I've done a bunch of reading on it and I found out the history of the style and everything else, but this isn't something I really know enough about to pick this apart because it's not a style I've ever sought out. It's a style that I've been pretty actively avoiding for several years. Actually, the better part of more than a decade now. Yeah, I think I've been avoiding this since the very early 2000s. Yeah, this comes back to Greg Noonan, made the very first one probably in the early 1990s. That's how I kind of opened to talking about him. So he would have been the very, very first, which is interesting because not only is he responsible for Black IPA, but his proteges, two of his most famous students, are actually the people who came up with New England IPA. And yeah, so I also think it's interesting the comparison I would make here is, Black IPA had this absolutely red hot run of like 5-7 years, and then everybody kind of all at once decided they were really tired of it and never wanted to have it again. And we're just kind of coming up on the 7-year mark for New England IPAs. And I'm wondering if, I don't think we'll see quite as sharp a fall off, but I'm wondering if we will definitely see a fall off with it in the same way that this has had. Or if it's so firmly established itself as a major beer style that we won't see any change at all.
Same bias against Black Pills.
No, none. I like Black Pills just fine.
Yeah.
You shouldn't call it Black Pills, it's a Schwartz beer, but whatever.
Okay.
The name is silly, but yeah, I have no issue with Black Pills or dark lagers in general.
Yeah.
And again, dark lagers is a whole family of them, going from like, your medium browns of like a Vienna lager to Schwartz beer to, what's the other one that's usually dark? Something in that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, there's a whole family of dark lagers, including like 2 different Czech ones. Establishment's More Than Rain is a really nice example of like a Czech style dark lager, whose name I couldn't possibly pronounce if you wanted me to. But yeah, I don't have an issue with dark lagers. This is really the only beer style that I genuinely do not enjoy and never have.
Yeah.
I would have told you until very recently that I had something of a axe to grind against like Mexican lagers, just because they're I'd never had one that really blew me away. What kind of makes them different is they are an adjunct lager, but rather than using raw corn like American adjunct lagers do, they tend to use corn sugar to actually bring up the alcohol in them, which gives them a very different mouthfeel and presence. And that's actually been a very, very hot beer style for craft brewers this year. I think I've seen more Mexican-style cervezas come out of like Alberta craft breweries in the last 6 months than I have ever in all time before that. To the point where Annex and Establishment, I just picked up their Neighbor Day brew, which is called Fast Friends, and it's a Mexican-style cerveza, and I actually had a pint of that yesterday, and it was really, really nice. So that'll be interesting. But yeah, I think every beer style has kind of come full circle and is either being, dragged back out of the history books or remade in a better way. But Black IPA, I don't know. It just seems to be stuck as this weird artifact of about 2008, and it's never really changed.
Right.
And in some ways I admire that, and in some ways I really have never liked this, and I'm not going to start now.
Said heavy. Is it all?
I mean, they tried to make Black IPA as a name go away a few years ago, Aaron. And they tried to launch the name Cascadian Dark Ale. And no blind man, until at least very recently, was still labeling their Black IPA Cascadian Dark Ale. But that was one of those things that a few people really wanted to make stick, and it just never stuck. So you'll occasionally see a beer named a Cascadian Dark Ale. It never stuck. It's a Black IPA for better or worse. And yes, it's the P stands for pale. How can you have a black pale ale? Shut up. It's the name of the style. A lot of, pale ales that aren't terribly pale either. Granville Islands, and again, Granville now is kind of a shell of itself, but Granville's English Bay Pale was one of the very first craft beers that I really came to love, and it's almost into the range of being a dark beer, because it's a very old school English style pale ale, which was very close to a brown, but with more hops. So pale ale is kind of a range of beers. It's not just a singular category. And I don't think that we should be judging Black IPA, too harshly because, it says both the word black and pale in the name. No, we should be judging it harshly because it's a shitty beer style that nobody should ever drink. There are so much better reasons to hate Black IPA than you just don't like the contradiction of it being both black and pale in the same name. Craig, you're getting fake banana? I actually like this one best so far, and I can tell this one's been very, very divisive. I get a really, really pretty, floral ink sort of thing off of this. I do see exactly where you're going with, fake banana, but to me it's coming off more like those penny candy, cola bottle gummies, and it's kind of reminding me of those in a very positive way. But okay, yeah, now that you say fake banana, now I can't get away from it. Molson did buy Granville Island. Yeah, it smells like fancy ink, proper calligraphy ink, but there's also a real floral component tied to that same aroma. That was interesting. I think it's my favorite so far, but that's not exactly a ringing endorsement either. We have a brew date on this guy? We do, actually. Look at that. Okay, brewed this year. January, sure, but brewed this year. Fair enough. That's, at least this year. Bloody hell. At least it's not horribly outdated, exactly. So if you like malt and hops, where would I go? I'm not gonna, poo-poo anyone's favorite beer, I say after 23 minutes of shitting on Black IPA, which is probably someone's favorite beer. I would probably go with an English style bitter. One of the things I really learned last year with the Hoyne Appleton, I really like that nice, approachable, biscuity, rich mouth, and then just nice, steely into floral, into earthy hops kind of sitting on top of that. I think that's actually really cool. And maybe why I like the NOIR a little bit better is I think it's the closest to that. the hops that are there, they're not trying to be over the top piney. They seem to come off more like an English style ale to me. Like, I've got the empty glass here, and again, close your eyes and stick your nose in. If I told you that was the leftovers of like an English bitter, you might actually believe me. I also think in the empty glass, the fake banana thing kind of goes away a little bit. The nose on this is by far my favorite. The Revival had, I think, a better mouthfeel. It certainly had more presence. It was a little bit bigger. It was a bit roastier. I appreciated that about it. This, maybe not in the mouth, is quite as good as the Revival, but I think as a package, this was overall the most pleasant so far. Yeah, and Rausch beer is kind of its own thing. That comes from the German city of Bamberg, and it's really just native to there, most famously done by the Schlenkerla brewery, who we do see in Alberta every now and again, and we get 3 or 4 different beers from them. And it's smoked with beechwood. So it is a very hammy, bacony, sausagey sort of smoke. It doesn't come off like peat smoke. It doesn't come off like coffee. It doesn't come off kind of green in any way. It's a very rich kind of brown smokiness that reminds me of bacon and ham more than anything else. It's a really, really lovely flavor that I get really sick of after one. And I want one and one only Rausch beer. I will also say the first time I had Schlenkerla, I just given up on like a 90-day like on the wagon dry thing, and it was like the very first time I went back on beer, and I got unfathomably hungover the next day. Even though I didn't really drink that much, my body just was not ready for it, and I spent the better part of a day throwing up Bamberg style Rausch beer, and I have never really gotten that big on it since. Empty glass, you get molasses. I could see molasses. Yeah, molasses into those like Halloween kisses almost, the molasses candies. I could see that very much. There is something really candied about these two, which is interesting. And I'm not sure if that is the result of, say, boiling the wort and caramelizing some of those darker sugars, or what that's going to be. But that they both do have a certain candy note. Now then, hiding behind these beer glasses for Eric's color spectrum that is completely pointless in black and white, we have next week's beer tasting, and we are going to have a guest from Dandy. Ian from Dandy will be joining us to taste 4 of their seasonal offerings, including 2 that have been made for a very special event. So, first off, we have the I Will Adore You Till Eternity. This is a West Coast IPA. Very excited for this one. Also, we have their Decalogue of the Artist, which is a Belgian pale ale with a Brett. Now, those 2 are very, very dandy ideas, particularly this one. I'm really excited for these. I think they'll be really interesting. And then there's 2 that are just a little more special occasion focused. Now, Sled Island is just kicking off in Calgary here in the next little bit. And there's, again, an official Sled Island beer. And this is it. It's called Just Play It Loud. It's a German-style Hefeweizen. And this is the one the folks at Dandy really wanted me to pour. So I'm really excited to show that off, because I like Hefeweizen more than I thought I did a year ago. I thought I was thoroughly sick of it, because that was one of the first styles I ever really liked. And I dragged myself to the point where I just didn't like it anymore. I kind of got tired of it in a way I never got tired of IPA. Finally, this is the one I'm worried about, and I'm worried about because it's a watermelon goza. Now, this has been brewed by Dandy to commemorate the 10th anniversary of National, which is a beer bar in Calgary. And watermelon as a flavor, historically, in my opinion, does not translate to beer desperately well. So this is either going to be an incredible experience of how did they get the watermelon to translate? This is so good. Or we're all going to be like, well, there's 3 beers on the tasting and then this one. And I'm very curious to see which way that goes. We have to taste the last one? It is the Dandy. I'm also really curious about why Dandy does what they do. They always seem kind of separate from the rest of the Calgary scene to a point. Like, geographically, they're, you know, a hop and a skip from 88, but they've never struck me as being kind of part of that social media darling, the way that, you know, Cabin 88 and to a lesser extent, say, Annex or Establishment are, they've always been kind of separate. They've been, you know, kind of going their own way. And my issue with Dandy for the store is that Dandy is not historically a good seller. I tend to put a lot of Dandy on sale. I've always loved their brewing, and I've actually really liked their brewery as well. I think they have a really neat spot, although I still haven't had the food. Yeah, Dandy next week is going to be a lot of fun. And also, Aaron is doing some work out in Vancouver and taking his rig with him the week after. So the first week of July, which I believe is July 6th, we will have no beer tasting. So if you're looking to get your beer tasting itch scratched, do come in for Dandy next week. Nothing on the 6th, and then the week after, well, I kind of want to do that edible glitter sour with Fruity Pebbles. So we might just build like a dumb sour tasting. I mean, if we're going to do that, we might as well do like 88 Fruity Pebbles, like we have to. And then we'll find 2 other fun sours and kind of build a wild and crazy fun sours event around trying the edible glitter sour, because I'm just fascinated that it exists.
Yep.
You know what? I don't mind this. This is okay. This smells, again, not desperately like an IPA per se, but I mean, there's definitely hops here. I think the hops are the prettiest of the 4 so far. Ooh. Okay. I would actually drink a can of that. I think that's okay. Yeah, that's... Now, okay, let's be honest. If I'm at Dandy and they have all of this plus their core range, I'm not going to order one of those. But if someone bought it for me, you know, not because they thought it would be funny, because they know I don't like black, but somebody bought me in the Bleak Midwinter for me and they didn't know, and it was just like, here, I bought you a beer, I wouldn't be whiny and I'd actually enjoy it. So I also think to a point I would probably enjoy the revival. This I really liked until I think Craig said fake banana, and now it's literally all I get. Yeah, I also like that it's kind of big and bold right away, and then you get it in the mouth and the roastiness is clearly there, but it tapers off. It finishes fairly clean. I also think if you went back and tasted all of these again, which we're not going to do, or at least I'm not going to do, you'd get a fair amount of soapiness. I don't really get soap on this, and I think that's one of the things I dislike about the Black IPA style as a whole, is it very often to me comes off soapy. If it's okay, does that mean it's not a Black IPA? Like I said, I've liked Black IPAs in the past. I liked Half Pint's Galaxy Black IPA. I thought that was okay. No, you know what? Fairball Dandy. There is now one Black IPA, because I don't think Half Pints has made their Galaxy in years. There's now one Black IPA that I actually kind of like, and I also quite like the revival. So you know what? Full marks to the two folks from Calgary. Now also, in the sense of fairness, these are by far the 2 freshest as well. I will put the Duclaw third, which was better than I thought, right to the point somebody actually pointed out the fake banana thing, at which point I couldn't taste it, and I'm actually going to disqualify the Steamworks for being too old. If this wasn't a year old, maybe it would have been the best thing on the table. But we can't know, because it's from September of last year. So, 1, 2, 3, and did not place for me. I'm curious to see what everybody else is going to come in on this one, because this is the first one in a while where I really don't know. Usually I can tell from the comments, or I can tell from like the chatter of myself and other people interacting, like I've got a pretty good idea what's going to win. This one I'm really not sure. Yeah, and I'm curious about that too, actually, Chad. If this was the Black IPA that inspired you to brew Black IPAs, what about this actually drove you into the arms of Black IPA? Never to return. Well, probably to return, but you know. Is it okay if we just talk to next week's guest about Black IPA for an hour? Look, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, okay? We've made it 35 minutes and I've hated all of it. So 4, 2, 3. Okay, so we're the same. 4, 2, 3, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 4. Oh, Jeremy actually likes the Duclaw. Awesome. Well done, Jeremy. Well, outstanding, everyone. I can guarantee next week, being as we'll have a guest, will be a good deal longer. For all of you people who are really, really worried about, the time. Okay, Megan, you know what? That's kind of how I feel about it too. I was also highly apprehensive about the tasting, and I don't think I came out of it with any beers that I would actually spend my own money on. I don't think so. But I came out with a renewed respect for Dandy, to the point where we're literally doing a tasting of Dandy coming up. And I'm going to pretend that was related to the quality of the beer and not just me putting this in the tasting and be like, oh yeah, I really need to do a Dandy event. And also Revival. That was really solid. That's actually the one I think I'm going to go back to finish off here and do kind of my final thoughts. Tasting order on this one, by the way, not fun to set. They're all very, very similar, and I really think that the Dandy had to finish and the Steamworks had to start just because it was so much lighter. These two could so easily have flip-flopped. And I don't get the music, so I'm just gonna have to take everyone's word for it. I am not drinking the bucket. Nothing on this earth will compel me to drink the bucket. No one has spat in it today, but that is a thing that happens, so... You know what? That's all right. That's solidly 1-2 for me. Alright, yeah, I like that. Outstanding. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will, $50. You could add 2 more zeros and I wouldn't drink it. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I will see you all next week for Dandy. In the meantime, I'm just glad it's over. That's it. I'm glad we got through it. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you again.